Today I am going to teach you about a model of program evaluation. After I finish my lecture, you will know exactly what is program evaluation. You will learn the importance of program evaluation, the tools that are required, the necessity and the importance of program evaluation in a community. Let me give you an introduction. What exactly is program evaluation? Program evaluation is a systematic method for collecting, analyzing and using information to answer questions about projects, policies and programs, particularly about their effectiveness and efficiency. In both the public and private sectors, stakeholders often want to know whether the programs they are funding, implementing, voting for, receiving or objecting to are producing the intended effect. While program evaluation first focuses around this definition, important considerations often include how much the program costs per participant, how the program could be improved, whether the program is worthwhile, whether there are better alternatives, if there are unintended outcomes, and whether the program goals are appropriate and useful both. Let me tell you about the steps that are involved in program evaluation. The 6 connected steps of the framework are actions that should be a part of any evaluation. Although in practice the steps may be encountered out of order, it will usually make sense to follow them in a recommended sequence. That's because earlier steps provide the foundation for subsequent progress. Thus, decisions about how to carry out a given step should not be finalized until prior steps have been thoroughly addressed. However, these steps are meant to be adaptable, not rigid. Sensitivity to each program's unique context, for example, the program's history and organizational climate, is essential for sound evaluation. They are intended to serve as starting points around which community organizations can tailor an evaluation to best meet their needs. Now these are: engage the stakeholders, describe the program, focus the evaluation design, gather credible evidence, justify the conclusions, and ensure use and share lessons learned. Understanding and adhering to these basic steps will improve most evaluation efforts. The second part of the framework is a basic set of standards to assess the quality of evaluation activities. There are 30 specific standards organized into the following 4 groups. First, utility. Second, feasibility. Third, propriety. And fourth, accuracy. These standards help answer the question, will this evaluation be a good evaluation? They are recommended as the initial criteria by which to judge the quality of the program evaluation efforts. Let me talk to you in detail about the steps that I have mentioned. Let's begin with engage stakeholders. Stakeholders are people or organizations that have something to gain or lose from what all be learned from an evaluation, and also in what all be done with that knowledge. Evaluation cannot be done in isolation. Almost everything done in the community health and development work involves partnerships, alliances among different organizations, board members, and those affected by the problem and others. Step 2 is describe the program. A program description is a summary of the intervention being evaluated. It should explain what the program is trying to accomplish and how it tries to bring about those changes. The description will also illustrate the program's core components and elements, its ability to make changes, its stage of development, and how the program fits into the larger organizational and community environment. Next is focus the evaluation design. By focusing the evaluation design, we mean doing advanced planning about where the evaluation is headed and what steps it will take to get there. It isn't possible or useful for an evaluation to try to answer all the questions for all stakeholders. There must be a focus. A well-focused plan is a safeguard against using time and resources inefficiently. Gather credible evidence. Credible evidence is the raw material of a good evaluation. The information learned should be seen by stakeholders as believable, trustworthy, and relevant to answer their questions. Next is justify conclusions. The process of justifying conclusions recognizes that the evidence in an evaluation does not necessarily speak for itself. Evidence must be carefully considered from a different number of stakeholders to see their perspectives and reach conclusions that are well substantiated and justified. Now, conclusions become justified when they are linked to the evidence gathered and judged against agreed upon values set by the stakeholders. Stakeholders must agree that conclusions are justified in order to use the evaluation system with confidence. Ensure use and share lessons learned. It is naive to assume that lessons learned in an evaluation will necessarily be used in decision making and subsequent action. Deliberate effort on the part of the evaluators is needed to ensure that the evaluation findings will be used appropriately. Preparing for their use involves strategic thinking and continued vigilance in looking for opportunities to communicate and influence. Both of these should begin in the earlier stages of the process and continue throughout the evaluation. Let's talk about doing an evaluation now. Program evaluation may be conducted at several stages during a program's lifetime. Each of these stages raises different questions to be answered by the evaluator, and correspondingly different evaluation approaches are needed. Rossi, Lipse, and Freeman in 2004 suggest the following kinds of assessment, which I shall talk to you now. These assessments may be appropriate at these different stages. Number 1, assessment of the need of the program. Number 2, assessment of the program design and logic or theory. 3, assessment of how the program is being implemented. That is it being implemented according to the plan? Are the program's processes maximizing possible outcomes? Next is assessment of the program's outcome or impact. That is what it has actually achieved. And then finally, assessment of the program's cost and efficiency. Let's move on to assessing needs. A needs assessment examines the population that the program intends to target to see whether the need as conceptualized in the program actually does exist in the population and whether it is in fact a problem, and if so, how it might best be dealt with. This includes identifying and diagnosing the actual problem the program is trying to address. who and what is affected by the problem, how widespread the problem is, what are the measurable effects that are caused by the problem. For example, for a housing program aimed at mitigating homelessness, a program evaluator may want to find out how many people are homeless in a given geographic area and what their demographics are. Rossi, Libse and Freeman in 2004 caution against undertaking an intervention without properly assessing the need for one, because this might result in a great deal of wasted funds if the need does not exist or it was misconceived. Needs assessment involves the processes or methods used by the evaluators to describe and diagnose social needs. This is essential for evaluators because they need to identify whether programs are effective, and they cannot do this unless they have identified what the problem or the need is. Programs do a needs assessment can have the illusion that they have eradicated the problem or the need, when in fact there was no need in the first place. Needs assessment involves research and regular consultation with community stakeholders and with the people that will benefit from the project before the program can be developed and implemented. Hence, it should be a bottom-up approach. In this way, potential problems can be realized early because the process would have involved the community in identifying the need and thereby allowed the opportunity to identify potential barriers. Now, the important task of a program evaluator is thus to first construct a precise definition of what the problem is. Evaluators need to first identify the problem or the need. Second, assess the extent of the problem. Having clearly identified what the problem is, evaluators need to then assess the extent of the problem. They need to answer where and how big questions. Third, define and identify the target of interventions and accurately describe the nature of the services needs of the population. It is important to know who or what the target population is or are. It might be individuals, it might be groups, communities, etc. Being able to specify what or who the target is will assist in establishing appropriate boundaries so that the interventions can correctly address the target population and be feasible to apply. The next issue that I am going to take up is assessing program theory. The program theory, also called a logic model or the impact pathway, is an assumption implicit in the way that the program is designed about how the program's actions are supposed to achieve the outcomes it intends. Now, this logic model is often not stated explicitly by people who run the programs. It is simply assumed, and so an evaluator will need to draw out from the program staff how exactly the program is supposed to achieve its aims and assess whether this logic is plausible. For example, in an HIV prevention program, it must be assumed that educating people about HIV/AIDS transmission, risk and safe sex practices will result in safer sex being practiced. Rossi, Libse and Freeman suggest 4 approaches and procedures that can be used to assess the program theory. Now, these approaches are: number 1, assessment in relation to social needs. This entails assessing the program theory by relating it to the needs of the target population the program is intended to serve. If program theory fails to address the needs of the target population, it will be rendered ineffective even when if it is well implemented. Assessment of logic and plausibility. This form of assessment involves asking a panel of expert reviewers to critically review the logic and plausibility of the assumptions and expectations inherent in the program's design. The review process is unstructured and open-ended so as to address certain issues on the program design. Assessment through comparison with research and practice. This form of assessment requires gaining information from research literature and existing practices to assess various components of the program theory. The evaluator can assess whether the program theory is congruent with research evidence and practical experiences of programs with similar concepts. Next is assessment via preliminary observation. This approach involves incorporating first-hand observations into the assessment process as to provide a reality check on the concordance between the program theory and the program itself. The observations can focus on the attainability of the outcomes, circumstances of the target population, and the plausibility of the program activities and the supporting resources. Next is assessing implementation. Process analysis looks beyond the theory of what the program is supposed to do and instead evaluates how the program is being implemented. This evaluation determines whether the components identified as critical to the success of the program are being implemented. The evaluation determines whether the target populations are being reached, people are receiving the intended services, staff are adequately qualified, etc. Process evaluation is an ongoing process in which repeated measures may be used to evaluate whether the program is being implemented effectively. Let's go on to assessing the impact now. Assessing the impact means effectiveness of the program. The impact evaluation determines the causal effects of the program. This involves trying to measure if the program has achieved its intended outcomes, that is, the program outcomes. What are program outcomes? An outcome is the state of the target population or the social condition that a program is expected to have changed. Program outcomes are the observed characteristics of the target population or social conditions, not of the program. Thus, the concept of an outcome does not necessarily mean that the program targets have actually changed or that the program has caused them to change in any way. There are two kinds of outcomes, namely outcome level and outcome change, also associated with program effect. Outcome level refers to the status of an outcome at some point in time. Outcome change refers to the difference between the outcome levels at different points in time. Program change refers to that portion of an outcome change that can be attributed uniquely to a program as opposed to the influence of some other factor. Now I am going to talk about measuring program outcomes. Outcome measurement serves to help you understand whether the program is effective or not. It further helps you to clarify your understanding of your program. But the most important reason for undertaking the effort is to understand the impacts of your work on the people you serve. With the information you collect, you can determine whether the activities to continue and build upon and which you need to change in order to improve the effectiveness of the program. This can involve using sophisticated statistical techniques in order to measure the effect of the program and find a causal relationship between the program and the various outcomes. Now, more information about impact evaluation is found under the heading of determining causation, which I will discuss with you. But before that, let's talk about assessing efficiency. Finally, cost benefit or cost effectiveness analysis assesses the efficiency of a program. Evaluators outline the benefits and cost of the program for comparison. An efficient program has a lower cost benefit ratio. Now, how do you develop an evaluation plan? There are 4 main steps to developing an evaluation plan. 1. Clarifying program objectives and goals. 2. Developing evaluation questions. 3. Developing evaluation methods. And 4. Setting up a timeline for evaluation activities. Now, what is clarifying program objectives and goals? The first step is to clarify the objectives and goals of your initiative. What are the main things you want to accomplish? And how have you set out to accomplish them? Clarifying these will help you identify which major program contents should be evaluated. Now, one way to do this is to make a table of program components and elements. Moving on to developing evaluation questions. For our purposes, there are 4 main categories of evaluation questions. Let's look at some of the examples of possible questions and suggested methods to answer these questions. Later on, I will tell you a bit more about these methods and how they work. Planning and implementation issues. How well was the program or initiative planned out, and how well was this plan put into practice? Now, the possible questions: who participates? Is there diversity among participants? Why do participants enter and leave your programs? Are there a variety of services and alternative activities generated? Do those most in need of help actually receive the services? Are community members satisfied with the program meets local needs? Possible methods to answer those questions: monitoring system that tracks actions and accomplishments related to bringing about the mission of the initiative, member survey of satisfaction with goals, member survey of satisfaction with outcomes. Next is assessing attainment of objectives. How well has the program or the initiative met with its stated objectives? Possible questions: how many people participate? How many hours are participants involved? Possible methods to answer those questions: monitoring system, member survey of satisfaction with outcomes, and goal attainment scaling. Next is impact on participants. How much and what kind of a difference has the program or the initiative made for its targets of change? Now, here the possible questions could be: how has behavior changed as a result of participation in the program? Are the participants satisfied with the experience? Were there any negative results from participation in the program? And the possible methods to answer those questions: member survey satisfaction with goals, member survey of satisfaction with outcomes, behavioral surveys, interviews with key participants. Next is impact on the community. How much and what kind of a difference has the program or initiative made on the community as a whole? Now, the possible questions could be: what resulted from the program? Were there any negative results from the program? Do the benefits of the program outweigh the costs? And the possible methods to answer these questions: behavioral surveys, interviews with key informants, and community level indicators. Let me summarize of the lecture that I have taken with you. Program evaluation is a systematic method for collecting, analyzing, and using information to answer questions about projects, policies, and programs, particularly about their effectiveness and efficiency. Program evaluation is very important in a community so as to know what programs are beneficial for the individual members of the community. It helps the community heads to decide upon the changes required in the ongoing program.